Shalom, shalom, lerachok v'lekarov. Shalom, shalom to those who are far, rachok, and those who are near. We begin our words with our service tonight from the prophet Isaiah, who bid his listeners words of comfort of shalom to those who are near, karov, and those who are far, rachok. Isaiah preached these words in the midst of the return to the land during the time of Cyrus, some returning, others yet distant, all of whom sought shalom, physical peace, and spiritual wholeness. The words of Isaiah that we'll read in the Haftorah tomorrow take on a new resonance with us this year. A time of being socially distant, we seek nearness to each other. Even for reasons of safety, many are not physically present. To those who are present here in this room, we bless you with shalom. To those who are physically distant, rachok, to you as well, we bless you with shalom. You are here with us, you're part of the community, you make us whole. And on this evening of Kol Nidrei, the holiest night of the year, we know that to be close and to be distant, it's not merely about physical geography, but spiritual geography. We may be here physically, but we're spiritually distant from our tradition, our families, from being the people to whom we aspire to be. Sin has separated us from our spiritual selves. Sin has separated us from God. And tonight we seek to be repatriated to our higher selves and to our spiritual patrimony. Tonight we seek shlemut, spiritual wholeness. The story is told of a king who quarreled with his son, and in a fit of rage he exiled his child from the kingdom. Years passed, and the son wandered the earth. In time, the king's heart softened. He sent his ministers to find his son, asking him to return. When the young man was located, he said he could not return. He had been too hurt, and his heart still harbored bitterness. The ministers brought back the news to the king, who instructed them to give his son the following message: "Return as far as you can, and I will come the rest of the way to meet you." We have wandered, and we have strayed. Kol Nidrei calls us to return. We step forward trembling but hopeful, assured that if we do so with sincerity, our Father in heaven, the King of Kings, will meet us halfway, and together we shall all be whole. We turn to our machzorim to begin the service. The ark is opened. We are on page 204, or Zarua Letzadik. If you are able to, I invite you to please rise.
צדיק ולישרי לב שמחה אור זרוע לצדיק 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 ולישרי לב שמחה בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים.
By the authority of the court on high and by the authority of this court below, with divine consent and the consent of this congregation, we grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed. The Sefer Torah is removed from the ark. We remain standing. We are on page 205, Kol Nidre.
מיום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא עלינו הבא עלינו הבא עלינו לטובה כל ההון יכרת מה והון כל ההון יהון שרן שוויקין שוויתין בטלים ומבוטלים
Together in the English, page 205. All vows, renunciations, bans, oaths, formulas of obligation, pledges, and promises that we vow or promise to ourselves to God from this Yom Kippur to the next, may it approach us for good, we hereby retract. May they all be undone, repealed, canceled, voided, annulled, and regarded as neither valid nor binding. Our vows shall not be considered vows, our renunciations shall not be considered renunciations, and our promises shall not be considered promises. Kol Nidre, page 205.
בטלים ומבוטלים לשרירים ולקיימים נדרנה la ושבועת הענן, ושבועת הענן, ושבועת הענן, ושבועת
Together on page 204, as the Sefer Torah changes hands, a meditation on Kol Nidre, the top left of the page, 204. All the vows on our lips, the burdens in our hearts, the pent-up regrets about which we brooded and spoke through prayers without end on last Atonement Day, did not change our way of life, did not bring deliverance in the year that has gone. From mountain peaks of fervor, we fell to common ways at the close of the fast. Will you hear our regret? Will you open our prison? Release us from the shackles of habit? Will you accept our prayers, forgive our wrongs, though we sin again and again? In moments of weakness, we do not remember promises of Atonement Day. Recall that we easily forget. Take only our heart's intent. Forgive us, pardon us. Page 205, Kol Nidre.
חרטנה והון, כול הון ולהון יהון שרה. שבי בטלין ומבוטלין, בטלין ומבוטלין, לשרירין ולקיימים, ולקיימים, נדרה
The entire congregation of the people Israel shall be forgiven, as well as the strangers who dwell among them, for all have erred. The middle of the page, v'nislach.
v'nislach lechol adat bnei Israel ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה. סלח נא לעוום לעם הזה כגודל חסדך, וכאשר נסעת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה, ושם נאמר ויאמר אדוני ויאמר אדוני ויאמר אדוני ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו לזמן הזה
Praise are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of time and space, granting us life, sustaining us, and bringing us to this moment. Amen. We may be seated. I have no shortage of blessings in my life. Family, working with colleagues whom I love. And high on the list of those blessings is a partnership between the lay leadership of our community and the professional staff. It's why we honor our chairman holding the Torah, Amy Bressman, Art Penn, Alan Levine, Jeff Colvin, Steve Friedman from afar, a long legacy of committed lay leaders extending back the strength, the backbone of our community. And one of the greatest pleasures is the present officer leadership led by Mark Becker and by Natalie Barth. And it is a great pleasure and privilege to call on our chairman to share words of greeting with us this evening. Mark?
Thank you, Rabbi Cosgrove. Shana Tova. It's a privilege to be here with you. Whether you're physically back with us for the first time in almost 2 years, or one of the tens of thousands of people with us virtually, we should all feel the collective embrace. Because in this moment, in one way or another, we're together under one roof. Ma tovu halacha Yaakov, mishnotecha Yisrael. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. This verse is inscribed on the entrance to our 87th Street building. It comes from a biblical story when King Balak wanted to curse the people of Israel. Instead, his messenger Balaam praised the Israelites with the words, "How lovely are your tents," admiring how the tents were all arranged differently, yet all part of one unified group. The symbolism of tents as a spiritual gathering place in Judaism actually began generations earlier, when Abraham invited 3 strangers walking the road to join him in his tent. At that moment, Abraham symbolized the ideal kind of synagogue, one like Park Avenue Synagogue that welcomes everyone, even strangers, with open arms. This brings me back to a personal moment, one that has helped shape my leadership as chairman of Park Avenue Synagogue and my perspective on our path forward. It was exactly 29 years ago. I was a junior in college and found myself in Berlin on Yom Kippur night. It was the last place I expected to be on the holiest day of the year. But I was determined to observe it as best I could. God would meet me where I was, I told myself, even if it was in Germany. I really want to be part of something meaningful, to see fellow Jews and pound my chest alongside others during Kol Nidre. Since the internet wasn't mainstream at the time and smartphones had yet to be invented, I asked around where to find the synagogue. Dressed in the best outfit I could pull together, map in hand, I embarked on my journey. After a long trek, I finally arrived. I was excited. I thought the elders would embrace me. I knew they'd be proud that a young man from across the pond had sought them out. I confidently approached the door when the head usher spotted me. "Sorry, we're completely full. You can't come in." I tried coaxing him in different ways, telling him I was a Kohen. I am. Thanks, Dad. But I still turned away. Now, I didn't know then what I know now about synagogue security, tickets, and reserved seats. But that was the lowest point of my Jewish life. Alone in Germany, 50 years after the Holocaust, with no sense of belonging. I'd come all this way to find them. Couldn't they meet me halfway and open their doors? Couldn't they bring me under their tent? At the moment I needed Jewish ritual and community the most, I felt dejected. The continued inability of organized religion to make itself approachable has serious consequences. The recent Pew report showed the percentage of Jews identifying as Jewish is declining, especially among young adults, and it's only getting worse. Finding creative ways to to make Judaism accessible while maintaining our traditions is more important now than ever before. In 1899, over a decade after the founding of Park Avenue Synagogue, Mark Twain wrote about the longevity of Jews. He noted how the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans all rose to great heights, yet ultimately faded away. But the Jew, he says, saw them all, survived them all. What is the secret of his immortality? I believe the answer lies in the words inscribed on the entrance to our synagogue. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. Dwellings are for when we're stationary. A tent is for constantly changing where we are. The key to our immortality as Jews is throughout history, we've balanced both dwellings and tents, the unchanging and the changing, tradition and innovation. Tradition is the Chazan reciting a Dol Olam at the end of Shabbat services. Innovation is singing it to the melody of Hamilton. Tradition is saying Kaddish, but perhaps having to miss it because you're alone on a business trip. Innovation is Zooming alongside your community. Tradition is a few congregants studying Talmud around a table. Innovation is 60-second Torah videos watched by thousands. Rabbi Cosgrove characterized this balance of tradition and innovation before, explaining that our mission as a synagogue is not just about preserving the past. It's about taking the most sacred possession we have, the inheritance of our faith, and teaching it in a way that's compelling to the contemporary searching Jew. But to be clear, while we're committed to ensuring that no one is left behind, what we're not going to do is lose the traditions that make us Park Avenue Synagogue. Transformational community building, meaningful connections, beautiful melodies, uplifting prayers. Because at the end of the day, while we now have global reach, we're still a shul. But the personal moments are core to who we are at PAS and who we always will be. During this pandemic, Rabbi Cosgrove went to the backyard of a bar mitzvah boy at 9 p.m. to teach him how to wrap tefillin. Rabbi, thank you for your selfless, caring leadership and your relentless efforts to keep us grounded in our traditions and love of Judaism. A PS member who recently became disabled gets regular visits from Cantor Schwartz. Cantor, your voice rings loud, but your heart beats louder. Thank you for filling our souls with your warmth. When a long-term synagogue member was lonely after his wife passed away, Rabbi Zuckerman visited and comforted him. Thank you, Rabbi Zuckerman, for always demonstrating perhaps the finest tradition we have, chesed, loving kindness. And Rabbi Rakowski used outdoor space in his apartment building to host youth get-togethers, Shabbat dinners, a memorial service, and even a wedding. Rabbi, thank you for your compassion and passion for keeping our community together. PS tradition is also about the lay leaders of our community stepping up when needed the most. Our indefatigable officer team has navigated this unprecedented crisis with hard work, loyalty, and creativity. Thank you, Lizzie Marcus, Nan Rubin, Amy Steiner, Mark First, Craig Solomon, Mark Hirsch, and our president, Natalie Barth. You've honored our tradition in unimaginable ways. And thank you to our remarkable PAS staff. You've once again demonstrated PAS excellence. While tradition has kept our people together, our rituals are constantly evolving. During Lecha Dodi, there's traditionally a time to stand and a time to turn around. But PS has adapted to be more inclusive, and we now say, stand if you're able. Similarly, those who can't make it to 87th Street can watch PS services from anywhere in the world. Whether you're a student at Dartmouth, wanting to see their father give a speech on the Bima, hi Olivia, I miss you, or you're watching Kabbalat Shabbat services or preparing your family Sabbath dinner. So what are the sanctuary rules if you aren't in the sanctuary? Sometimes you're already standing for part of the tefillah we typically stand for, so there's no need to rise. For other parts where we sit, we can't because the brisket may burn. Sit or stand. Stand or sit. What does tradition tell us to do? It reminds me of another story. It happened at the old synagogue. When the Shema was said, half the congregants stood up and half remained seating. The half was seated started yelling at those standing to sit down. And the one standing yelled at the one sitting to stand up. The rabbi didn't know what to do, so he convened a meeting with the chairman to settle this once and for all. The one whose followers stood during Shema said to the chairman, "Is it synagogue tradition to stand during this prayer?" The chairman replied, "No, that's not the tradition." "Aha," said the other one, "we're right. The tradition must be to sit. The chairman then retorted, "No, that's not tradition." The rabbi was exasperated. "I need an answer. The congregants are fighting all the time, arguing with each other." The chairman interrupted, exclaiming, "Now that is tradition." Kidding aside, Judaism has figured out how to survive generation after generation by anchoring innovation in tradition, by staying true to our values while evolving to meet us all in the moment. And for the past 140 years, and especially during this terrible pandemic, so has Park Avenue Synagogue. The story of Matovu was about turning a curse into a blessing. And that's exactly what we've done at PS during COVID, finding opportunity during catastrophe, finding the good, the tov, in the worst of situations. COVID pushed us as a synagogue to be bold and adapt quickly while preserving our most sacred traditions. We got creative, we innovated, and did what we needed to stay accessible. We launched almost 200 videos along with e-learning classes for Tefillah, Judaic, and Hebrew studies. We kicked off Calling Generations, a matching program that facilitates conversations between teens and lonely older synagogue members. We featured marquee speakers like Fareed Zakaria, created a dialogue for our teams with Barry Weiss, and heard on Shabbat from Senator Jackie Rosen and Senator Chuck Schumer. And travel at PS continued, virtually, with dozens of young families taking trips to Israel, and for adults, Magic Carpet Mondays kicked off with hundreds in virtual Vilna. On Mitzvah Day, we organized a virtual collection distributing over 1,000 sandwiches for the needy, and we've continued to do it that way throughout the year. By innovating and seizing the moment, we brought hundreds more existing members further into our tent. In fact, in a recent PS survey, over 50% of our members have reported increased participation. Additionally, our tent has been open to tens of thousands of Jews around the world, tuning in from over 30 countries. Now, if we look back at what we've accomplished this past year as an institution, there's so much to be proud of. Steve Jobs once said, "Innovation distinguishes a leader from a follower." And I'm proud to say the PS community has led. But this shouldn't be a fleeting moment. We cannot stop here, because it's not just about what we achieved yesterday. It's about what we will achieve tomorrow. That's why the theme of our Konidre Appeal campaign this year is Kadima, forward. We need to push ahead, constantly raise the bar, and continue to turn the challenges of the moment into opportunity. And at PS, we're doing just that. We've rolled out our new video network, PS Connect, starting with the first iteration on the Holodays, so everyone can easily join our services and programming. And there's much, much more to come in the months ahead. We welcome our new executive director, Valerie Russo, who will lead the charge in operationalizing our increased accessibility. We created a new position, head of content and innovation, and welcome Rabbi Kaufman, who will be supported by a new head of AV and new head of communications, all to effectuate what Rabbi Kashra calls Big Tent Judaism. And we're going to continue delivering exceptional in-person and hybrid programming like right now, because this moment requires us to be accessible to achieve the PS mission to inspire, educate, and support each other toward living passion-filled Jewish lives. And to fulfill our mission and meet the needs of the moment, we depend on your financial support. Last year, we raised a record $4 million from 1,000 member families, and also over $400,000 from 2,000 non-members, enabling us to balance our budget while creating a foundation for our path forward. I sincerely thank you all for your past and continued support. I'd like to go back to how I began. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, mishnotecha Yisrael. The tents that Balaam praised were all different, representing how we're each at different points in our own spiritual journey. That's really what the spirit of Yom Kippur is about, evolving who we are, embracing change within ourselves, and innovating our personal connections to Judaism. Almost 3 decades ago, on that lonely Kol Nidre night in Berlin, there were 2 paths for me to follow. And after almost 9 years as an officer, and now my final as your chairman, I'm proud to have chosen to passionately embrace Judaism and honored to have led. Tonight, we all stand at an inflection point. We've seen this past year what we're capable of as individuals, as a synagogue, as a community. We set new standards of accessibility, excellence, and kindness. We have an opportunity to meet the moment. And this moment for our community is now. We must keep moving forward. Kadima. Each of us can choose to step in, step up, and elevate Jewish traditions. There isn't one right way. Every tent faces a different direction. But together, if we all do our part, we'll enrich our traditions for the generations to come. Whatever direction your tent is facing, you always have a home at Park Avenue Synagogue. Gemar Chatima Tova may be inscribed and sealed in the book of life for a year of happiness, health, peace, and prosperity. And we all seize this moment and open our tents to each other and all those who wish to enter. Thank you. For those physically present, the ushers will now pass through the aisles for anyone wishing to show your support. For those joining from afar, you can easily make a gift online by hitting the gold donate button at the top of your screen.
Mark, thank you so much, and thank you as the ushers come through. Thank you to everyone here for your support of the synagogue. Thank you to everyone online for your support of the synagogue. And if, Mark, you're still within earshot, to you and to Karen and to the family, we wish you a Shana Tova, sweet, healthy, happy new year. And thank you just for being you. We're very blessed to have Mark as our leader. On page 207, if you are able, we turn our attention to the Mariv service. Please rise.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בדברו מעריב ערבים. ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני. המריב הרבים.
You have loved your people, the house of Israel, with infinite love, teaching us Torah and mitzvot, statutes and laws. (208)
אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה, ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם לעולם ועד.
We may be seated together with the Cantor.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום, ושיננתם לבניך בשבתך בביתך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
Continuing silently through the bottom of page 209. Page 209. הישמרו לכם פן יפתה לבבכם בצרתם.
מה נאמר לכם ממנו ונכם על מה שחשבנו. הוא ייתם אותו וזכר אדם את כל מצווה. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
We continue through the middle of page 210, the song at the sea, chanted by the Israelites for the first time, from servitude to freedom. Who is like you, Adonai? Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai.
ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל לכנו שירה. בשמחה רבה ואמרו עולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני. מלכותך ראו בניך ובוקע הים לפני משה ומרים זה עליינו ואמרו אדוני מלוך. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גל ישראל.
We're on page 211. We're about to chant Hashkivenu, which brings together three themes: the themes of peace, the themes of vulnerability, and the themes of sleep. And the Cantor's about to chant this. But before we do, whenever I come to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I always think about who's not here, who was here last year. And we all do. It's human to do that. And I think this year of so many people, but there's one I want to speak about right now at Hashkivenu, who was a gentleman who sat right there, kind of Andy where you are right now. His name was Clive Chaget. And Clive passed away this year. I think I saw Bonnie and to Lisa and to Lori, we wish that his memory is for a continued blessing. And Clive was this terrific guy. And every time I would walk around with the Torah, and he would be kind of right there, he'd just give me this bear of a smile and this big hug, and as if like he didn't know I was coming around the corner. And I'm like, I do this every single Shabbos, and it was just sort of this enthusiasm that I said, he's excited to see me, but he was excited to be, in shul and with the Torah, and it's good to be a Jew. And I was wondering what it was. And when I met with the family, and Bonnie, you probably remember this conversation, you were sharing with me how Clive grew up. And that when Clive grew up, he was born in 1937 in the Blitz in London. Every night when he would go to sleep, as London was being bombed, there would be a number that was placed up at top of his apartment. Because if it was bombed, they would need to know how many bodies to uncover under the rubble. And I think of the fact that his childhood was marked by these years in London under conditions like that, and somehow he emerged resilient, and what that feeling of vulnerability must have been like, and then that love of life that ultimately became and is his legacy. And I think about this at Hashkivenu because it's all about the vulnerabilities that we feel when we go to sleep, not under those circumstances, but I was reading this fabulous and fascinating book by a Columbia neuroscientist, Adam Small, who makes the point that for evolutionary biologists, sleep makes no sense, meaning the idea that we should leave ourselves defenseless for a third of our lives is a very curious thing from an evolutionary standpoint. And the book is about why it is that we sleep, what function. It's actually about much more than that, but his point is that we need to sleep because over the course of a day, over the course of our lives, we are introduced to so much and so much trauma that if we didn't have sleep, and this was a theory by someone named Francis Crick that actually was substantiated through scientific research, if we didn't have the gift of sleep, if we weren't allowed to make ourselves vulnerable, then we would never be able to dream. And not just dream, but to be creative, to sort of shed all that is built up over the course of our lifetime, all the sometimes trauma, in order to face a new day. And so these themes of the vulnerability, the need to build resilience, and the prayers for peace are all tied in to the Hashkivenu prayer, which I would present to you, and certainly those of you with parents, with children or grandchildren, is a critically important conversation to think about now. Because we're not living through a moment of a blitz, thank God, but we are living through a moment of trauma. And we need to think about how our children, our grandchildren, and we ourselves, as we pray for peace, can emerge with shlemut, with wholeness, into their lifetimes ahead. We're on page 211, Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leshalom, Leshalom, Leshalom. Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leshalom, Leshalom, Leshalom. Ve'hamidenu Malkeinu Ufros aleinu sukat shlom echad Ushemor tzeteinu uvoenu lechayim uleshalom lechayim uleshalom מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל Israel. כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם, לפני אדוני תטהרו, יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לילה לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תוש בחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן.
The silent Amidah, or silent meditations, begin on page 213 and continue through page 221 in the Hebrew, the English, the words on the page, the words on our hearts. We'll be reciting these prayers throughout the day over and over again. I encourage you to do, well, you can do what you want, but to do what I do is I take different dimensions of my life each time I meditate, my personal life, my professional life, my family and friends, and I try to focus in as such in these prayers that we say each and every time. Take your time, and you may be seated as you conclude. Good Yontif. May we all be sealed, signed into the book of life. The last time I saw and would ever see Gabe Legman was this past spring at my niece's, his granddaughter Caroline's bat mitzvah brunch. With his wife Sipora at his side, his 3 grown children kibitzing in the backyard, and a gaggle of his grandchildren splashing in his swimming pool, we exchanged warm words as Debbie and I said our goodbyes on our way back to New York from Los Angeles. There was a warm smile on his face, ear to ear, the kind of smile possible only from a man who was deeply aware of the blessings of his life. A smile that was present whenever we saw each other at Passover Seders, at Shabbat dinners, at Simchas, or whenever I had the good fortune to be in the company of my big brother's father-in-law. Gabe passed away a few months later at the age of 92 on the afternoon of July 29th in his favorite chair in the beautiful home that he had built, in full control of his faculties with classical music playing in the background. A passing as gentle, I think, as any person can wish for in this world. Not in a million years, I think, could the 15-year-old Gabe Legman have imagined the gentle circumstances by which his soul would return to his Creator. Born in the small town of Retag, Romania, Gabe, his parents, and his 3 brothers enjoyed a typical and pleasant village life filled with soccer and chess and Judaism. Gabe's idyllic existence would be upheaved, catastrophically so, when the Nazis and their local collaborators rounded up all the Jews and deported them to the Dej ghetto. From there, Gabe and his family would be transported to Auschwitz, where his mother Sarah and 3 brothers, Alexander, Tiberius, and Ludwig, were murdered. In time, Gabe and his father would be sent from Auschwitz to Buchenwald, from Buchenwald to Remsdorf, and Remsdorf to Theresienstadt. In the spring of '45, with the Russians approaching, Gabe and his father were herded into a sealed underground bunker with hundreds of other inmates with no provisions and left to die. 9 days later, when Theresienstadt was liberated by Soviet troops on May 9, 1945, Gabe and his father were amongst the very few to emerge alive. 2 weeks after liberation, Gabe and his father were sent back to Romania, and soon enough the horrors of the Nazis were replaced with the trials of communism. Gabe's father was able to emigrate to Israel in '49, but Gabe, conscripted to serve in the army, was refused permission to leave. Gabe never saw his father again, who passed shortly thereafter. Only in 1961, after years of failed attempts to leave the country, would Gabe, by way of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS, be able to emigrate to California by way of Vienna. He was penniless. He had no family and knew not a word of English. "Don't call us, we'll call you," they told him at the employment office, a call which, in the coming decades, he would joke that he had still yet to receive. With what skills he had, Gabe went to work as a dental technician amongst other odd jobs. In time, he would open up a lab with employees of his own. From that one lab, he began to dabble in real estate, a side hustle that would ultimately become his livelihood. The combination of his tireless work ethic, his business acumen, and unshakable optimism enabled Gabe to enjoy a success that well exceeded his impoverished beginnings. Together with his wife Sipora, they achieved the riches of raising 3 children and 9 grandchildren, each one with a unique, powerful, loving, and lasting relationship with their doting grandfather. May your grandfather's memory be for a blessing. Gabe was one of the least negative people who has ever walked this earth. Despite the traumas of the first decades of his life, he never spoke of himself as a victim. Gabe had every reason to reject God, but he held an unwavering faith, laying tefillin every day and living proudly as a Jew. Gabe would have been well within his rights to be suspect of human nature and resent humanity as a whole, but he lived every day with love, with compassion, and generosity of spirit. Having experienced the horrors of Nazism and communism firsthand, Gabe was no Pollyanna, but he leveraged his experiences towards a life of compassion, critical of any person or movement who sought to suppress the humanity of his another. To his dying day, Gabe never forgot what he had lost, asking that his brothers' names, the ones who had been denied proper burial, be inscribed alongside his own on his headstone. A deeply good person, a man who, despite having every reason to hate, had a heart as pure as it was filled with love, never allowing the trauma that was and would always be his to define the future that he sought to create for himself, his family, and all those blessed to know him. Long before Gabe Legman, and for that matter, long before the Holocaust, as Jews, we've well understood that who we are as individuals and as a community is defined by way of memory. The frequency by which the Bible instructs us to remember that we were once strangers in a strange land, the Jewish obligation to see ourselves as if we personally came out of Egypt or that we ourselves were standing at Sinai to receive the Torah. At times of both joy and sorrow, we remember. It's why we break glasses at Jewish weddings. Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, if I forget thee, Jerusalem, if I don't hold you in my memory, even at my happiest hour. It's why when we pray and invoke God's name, we always remember our God to be the same God of Abraham and Isaac, Sarah and Rebekah. It's why Milton Berle could quip that when a person converts to Judaism, they are granted 5,000 years of retroactive persecution. Jews are not the only people for whom remembrance of things past shapes present identity. We're just a particularly good case study. The project of remembrance, part and parcel to the task of living. But what we also know as Jews is that memory consists not just of one, but of two activities. Remembering, yes, but also the act of letting some of those memories go. We need both. The generation of the Exodus had no shortage of sins, the golden calf, the sin of the spies, multiple rebellions and complaints every step of the way. But their greatest sin, the one that tied all the other ones together and ultimately denied them from entry into the land, was their inability to free themselves from the psychological shackles of their servitude. They conjured up imagined pleasures of flesh pots of their Egyptian sojourn and allowed memories of the past to colonize their present to the detriment of their future. But it's not just misplaced nostalgia that impedes our forward momentum. As Jews, we're also on guard against the peril of perseverating in the memories of hurts that are better left behind. Remember, Amalek commands Deuteronomy in reference to our sworn enemy. Blot out their memory. How can one, you might ask, both remember and blot out memory at the same time? The rabbis explain that the commands are not contradictory. We remember, but we let go of the resentment, a cortical pruning that makes each of us who we are and ensures our forward momentum. It shouldn't be lost on any of us that the Yom Kippur ritual, as described in tomorrow's Torah reading, involves not one but two animals, one that's sacrificed and one that's released into the wilderness, representative of that which we must let go. It's a task that sits at the core of this Yom Kippur day, this sifting of memories, of vows, of injuries, insults, and otherwise. What are we going to bring forward? What are we going to let go of? What's the right balance between the two? Aside from the personal loss, the passing of Gabe, the final Holocaust survivor whom I can count within my extended family, has prompted me to reflect on a generational transition and transformation which we're all living through, the passing of a generation of American Holocaust survivors. According to the Claims Conference, the survivor population in the United States has dropped below 50,000, with a 76% projected decline by 2030. The numbers give us a sense of urgency. The landscape is shifting. Whether we're personally descendants of survivors or not, our Jewish identities have all been shaped in the presence of survivors. For me, they were family and family friends sitting at our Shabbos table, out to dinner with my parents, and all over the place. It was both remarkable and altogether unremarkable that I had a Hebrew school teacher with a tattoo on her arm. The same won't be said of the coming generations. Removed in time and testimony from the events of 70-plus years ago, there's going to be a new generation of caretakers for Holocaust memory. So I ask you, as we enter this new chapter of history, what shall we remember? And what memories do we allow to fade? Is there a right and a wrong to Holocaust memory? Who decides its correct use? Who calls out when it's abused. What will this next chapter look like? How shall we remember the Holocaust? In its most basic formulation, the answer to the question of Holocaust memory is both straightforward and unequivocal. We must always remember, as long as a Jew has breath to breathe, we remember the 6 million souls, the 1.5 million children who were murdered at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators. Israel's Holocaust Museum takes its name, Yad Vashem, from the prophet Isaiah, who describes the fear of those individuals who, lacking descendants, face the anxiety of being forgotten. A monument to their names by way of museums, memorials, education, Yom HaShoah observances, B'nai Mitzvah pairings, by any means necessary. We remember and we never forget. But how shall we remember? Is it death or is it life that we remember? Zochreinu l'chaim, we say over and over again throughout the day. Remember us l'chaim, for life. More important than remembering how the 6 million died, it seems to me we have to recall how they lived. Each life representing a millennial-long history of European Jewry, of culture, of literature, of living. If there's an adjustment that awaits this coming chapter of Holocaust remembrance, it's that we need to spend more time learning about those lives as they were lived and less time about those lives as they were lost. In her provocatively titled new book, People Love Dead Jews, author Dara Horn points out that while many people can name and perhaps have even visited 1, 2, maybe 3 concentration camps, just how many of us can name 3 Yiddish authors we know and have read? At Yad Vashem in Battery Park on the National Mall, around the country and throughout the world, these last 70-plus years have seen a proliferation of Holocaust museums, Holocaust departments, professorships to memorialize, document, and teach the destruction, to teach how Jews died. We should be proud of this work. It reflects the very best minds, philanthropy, and volunteerism of a generation. And now, let's set some goals for the next 70 years. A massive program of cultural reclamation to honor the lives, not the deaths, of the millions of Jews and millennial-long history about which we solemnly swear never to forget. To the question of whether to remember the lives of the 6 million, there's only one answer, a categorical yes. But more textured is the answer to the question of how we remember the wickedness of the Nazis and their collaborators. Practically speaking, and at risk of stating the obvious, the passing of the generation of survivors also signals the passing of the generation of perpetrators. I well understand over these last 70-plus years the need for justice, for reparations, and even for vengeance. Given the horror, how could it be otherwise? But what about the next 70 years? Shall we not loosen our grip of hatred just a little? You know, since his passing, I watched a video of Gabe's story as it was being documented by USC's Shoah Foundation. And as he sat down to be interviewed, Gabe noted that the interviewer had a German accent. And Gabe made a comment to the effect of being comforted in the knowledge that he was in the presence of a German who was on the right side of history. Not so, the woman clarified. Her parents had been card-carrying members of the Nazi Party. She had struggled to come to terms with her family history. Her efforts to preserve Holocaust memory reflected her personal commitment to turn the corner of personal and national history. Now, she may have been exceptional, and it's not as if anti-Semitism and hatreds of all kinds don't persist in Germany and elsewhere. Of course they do, a topic to which I'll turn momentarily. Nor is it a matter of whether we, the living, can forgive on behalf of the dead. It's not, I don't believe, our moral right to do so. It's just the first foundational principle of Jewish theology, that every person and every generation be judged on their own merits. Besides, there's an untold psychic cost to holding on to hatred. Rabbi Shlomo Karlebach, the Jewish museum about whom I've spoken in the past, was himself a refugee from the Nazis. He toured the world, and every so often he went back to Germany to give concerts. People would ask him, understandably so, how, given what the Germans did, could he go back and sing there? And Karlbach responded, I only have one soul. If I had two souls, I would gladly devote one of them to hating the Germans full time. But I don't. I only have one, and I'm not going to waste it on hating. What differentiates this coming chapter from the last chapter of Holocaust memory? A little less hate. And as sure as I am that in the coming 70 years we must loosen our intergenerational hold on hatred, I'm equally sure that we must redouble our efforts to remember the lessons of the Nazi rise to power. We are presently living in an era of democratic backsliding. The rise of anti-Semitism from the left and the right is one expression of the illiberalism of our times, but it's not the only one. The political violence of Charlottesville, of January 6th, the rise of conspiracy theories on social media, the fierce opposition to immigration, the renewed racism, the refusal to accept election outcomes, the sharp identity politics and toxic polarization of our time, these are all alarm bells. These are all warning signs. These are all the preconditions for the rise of authoritarianism and the failure of democracies. It's happening around the world, in China, in Russia, in Europe, but it's happening right here in our own backyard. The question doesn't have to be as charged as to whether another Holocaust can happen. The question can merely be whether we are that different from Weimar Germany, and whether here and now we too are witnessing the erosion of our own democracy. By a certain telling, the trauma of the Holocaust extended Western democracies a 70-year window that kept our demons in check, demons that I fear are now being let loose. If nothing else, the study of the Holocaust is an object lesson in what happens when societies fail to educate its citizens on the importance of democracy. The Holocaust is a case study spotlighting the shameful tendency of the world to stand idly by. 70 years ago against the Jews, or in our time against the Rohingya, the Uyghurs, Afghan women, and so many others. It was Elie Wiesel who taught that though the Holocaust was a unique and uniquely Jewish event, its implications are universal. We dare not now or in the years to come engage in comparative suffering, as if the enormity of our own suffering should preclude a life-saving lesson awaiting another. Just the opposite. As we write this next chapter, let the agonies of our past teach the world today. Let the philanthropy that supported Highest then for Jews support the Afghans now. Let our compassion help others. Let the moral vacuum of humanity's past inaction impel present humanity into action. There is much, so much, that the memory of the Holocaust still has to teach the world, a curriculum whose importance increases in urgency with every passing day. And it's not just the rest of the world who needs to reconsider the lessons of the Holocaust. We, the Jewish people, have to reintegrate the message of the Holocaust into our own self-understanding. For many years, I have argued that while I and perhaps you were part of a generation raised to believe that one must live Jewishly so as not to grant Hitler a posthumous victory, it's a rationale that has long run its course. Remember, yes, always, but if the argument for Jewish living is derived solely by way of Holocaust remembrance, then that's a Judaism that's not deserving of living. The Judaism that we will teach, preach, and practice at Park Avenue Synagogue to live passion-filled Jewish lives will never be independent of the Holocaust, but nor will it ever be dependent upon the Holocaust. And it's more than that. As a people, we have to be vigilant against any attempts from within our fold to instrumentalize the Holocaust towards justifying any aspect of our people's agenda. I understand why, in decades past, so much of Israel education was situated on the Holocaust. March of the Living trips with Israeli flags draped on our shoulders, or trips to Yad Vashem ending with the singing of Hatikvah. Not only do I understand such efforts, I actually led such efforts. But now, moving forward, we have to resist the urge to link Zionism too closely to the Holocaust. We have to resist because it's historically inaccurate to link the establishment of Israel with the Holocaust. Zionism long preceded the rise of Nazism. But we also have to resist because it's a linkage that plays directly into the arguments of our enemies, who would have the world believe that if not for the trauma of the Holocaust, there would be no Israel, a specious argument that will become stronger, not weaker, in the years ahead as a living testimony of the survivors fade. Arguments for Jewish life, arguments for the sovereign state of Israel, must stand independently of the Holocaust, even if not especially if, it means rethinking the use of Holocaust memory in both Jewish and public discourse. It is dangerous, it is dishonest, and it's a dishonor to the victims of the Holocaust to weaponize our memory of them for present political purposes. To say the borders of 1967 are the borders of Auschwitz, to say the year is 1939 and Iran is Germany, to say or do anything invoking the memory of the Holocaust as some sort of moral shield for policy in Israel or America is historically incoherent, morally repugnant, and a sign of deep failure from within. Remember, yes, but to leverage that memory to cover up our own lapses, or even worse, to justify them, that's an abuse of Holocaust memory to which we must never fall victim. No different than leaving Egypt, no different than standing at Sinai. For as long as Jews will be Jews, we will never forget. We will always be defined by Auschwitz. But it's a memory that must be a prompt for kindness, for compassion, for civility, and for action. As Menachem Rosensaft of the World Jewish Congress, himself the child of survivors, shared with me, it's not the dehumanization that took place that we have to remember. It's a defiant spirit of Jews facing death who refused to become like animals, who refused to allow themselves to be dehumanized by their oppressors, that we must remember. We identify with the victims, but we don't wallow in the victimization. We swear never to forget, even as we loosen our grip on generational resentments, our past pain never instrumentalized to justify present cruelty or ethno-national chauvinisms of any kind. To be defined by Auschwitz is to remember the Jewish inmate who shared their meager rations of what passed for food with a friend or a stranger who was more hungry. The inmate who used her medical training to save the lives of Jewish women and children, even after her own child had been murdered in the gas chamber. The Jewish inmate who sang a song or told a joke to lift the spirits of their barrack mates. The inmate who, in praying to God or refusing to pray to God, were equal manifestations of a determination to remain Jewish and thereby human in the face of the ruthless phalanx whose goal was to destroy both their Jewishness and their humanity. Today and every day we remember. We remember the 6 million, just as one day we will remember the survivors who I think would want to be remembered. Julia, as I know your grandfather would want to be remembered. Not for dwelling on death, but for rebuilding life, for their resilience, for their courage, for their strength, and for their capacity for hope, for their ability, even in the darkest of nights, to call on God, trustful and unafraid, eftach velo efchad. Their lives reminders not so much of remarkable people, but of just how remarkable people can be, and by extension, all of us. Thus may the 6 million, thus may the survivors, and thus may we here today prove ourselves worthy to be Zochreinu L'chaim, to be remembered for life. Good Yontif. At this time, we turn back to our machzor. If you are able, I invite you to please rise. The ark is opened. Ya'aleh, page 223.
יעלה תחנוננו מערב, ויבוא שבתנו מבוקר, ויראה רינוננו עד ערב. יעלה קולנו מערב, ויבוא צדקתנו מבוקר, ויראה פדיוננו עד ערב. יעלה עינוינו מערב, ויבוא סליחתנו מבוקר, ויראה נקתנו עד ערב. יעלה מנוסנו מערב, ויבוא למענו מבוקר, ויראה כיפורנו עד ערב. יעלה אישנו מערב, ויבוא טהורנו מבוקר, ויראה חינוננו עד ערב. יעלה זיכרוננו מערב, ויבוא ויהודנו מבוקר, ויראה הדרתנו עד ערב. יעלה דופקנו מערב, ויבוא גילנו מבוקר, ויראה בקשתנו עד ערב. יעלה נקתנו מערב, ויבוא אליך מבוקר, ויראה אלינו עד ערב.
We may be seated as the ark is closed. We are on page 225. I think we are going to get a taste of the generation to come. Haneshama lach, the soul is yours, the body is your creation. Have compassion on your handiwork.
שמך חנון ורחום שמך, למען שמך אדוני, וסלחת לעווננו כי רב הוא. הנשמה והגוף פולה, חוסה על המעלה.
Take that, Met Opera. We are on page 227. We are going to turn to Ki Hine Kachomer. This is one of my favorites, that the human being is compared to clay in the hands of the potter. So listen to something I did this summer. I went to, what else are you going to do? You're sitting here. I went to a Beach Boys concert. I mean, the price is right. It was free, and it was awesome. It was during those few weeks that everyone was out and about, and it was outside. And, founded, as everyone here knows, in 1961 in Hawthorne, California. The three brothers, Brian, Carl, and Dennis Wilson, a cousin, Mike Love, and a school friend, Al Jardine, right? Surfing Safari, Surfing USA, California Girls. Right? That's Beach Boys, right? Help me, Rhonda. Anyone else? What? Good vibrate. Thank you. Good vibrate. Okay. So here's the thing, though. I was Googling it as I was watching the concert and dancing. And in actual fact, and this isn't funny, but it's just a fact, Carl passed away in 1961, and Dennis died in 1983, and Brian is no longer touring, nor is Al Jardine. So the only original member that I actually saw was Mike Love, the cousin. So here's my question. By a show of hands, how many people think that I saw the Beach Boys that day? Okay, how many people think I saw something else that day? Okay, it's an interesting question, and you may have heard of this, this sort of philosophical experience. It's called the Ship of Theseus in Plato, right? And the idea behind the Ship of Theseus is that there is a ship that plank by plank is replaced, and it's this philosophical exercise to ask whether an object that's had all its components fundamentally replaced over time, is it the same object or is it a different object? So now let's play the game again. If you replace every plank one at a time, by the end, is it, raise your hand if you think it is the same ship. Raise your hand if you think it is a different ship. Okay. I don't know, I wasn't watching if your answers are the same for question number 1 and 2. But it goes directly into, or else I will make it go directly into Ki Hine Kachomer. Because here's the question. We're at the High Holidays right now. And the whole point of the High Holidays is to imagine ourselves as capable of, right, we turn to someone, we apologize, we identify a sin and we correct it, we reconcile with someone, we take all the planks, if you will, and we seek to replace them. If someone has done tshuva, repentance in its fullness, raise your hand if you think that person is the same person. Raise your hand if you think that person is a different person. Okay, I've totally lost track. But it's actually a false question, because unlike the Ship of Theseus and the Beach Boys of blessed memory, a human being's process of tshuva, ki hine kachomer, we are ultimately the same stuff. So what constitutes proper tshuva, what constitutes proper repentance? It's not that we imagine ourselves to be new, it's that we are reflective and repentant enough that the same stuff, the Hebrew word is chomer, is able to reconstitute itself as anew. And that's actually the promise of being a Jew. that we believe we are able to be the same but have learned and now be different. It's a promise of who we are, and it's a promise of how we treat others. And so let's turn to page 227, Ki hine kach omer.
Ki hine kach omer beyad hayotzer. כן אנחנו בידך חסד נוצר. כי כגרזן בידך רש. כן אנחנו בידך תומכני ורש. כי הנה כזכוכית ביד המזגג. כן אנחנו בידך מוכל זדון ושגג. כי הנה ככסף ביד הצורף. כן אנחנו בידך ממציא למזור טרף. כי הנה כך אומר ביד היוצר. כן אנחנו בידך חסד נוצר.
We may be seated. Cantor, I promise I'm not going to interrupt every prayer. I'm just so excited everyone's here. I finally have an audience for 18 months. I haven't, but you're going to like this one, because we are about to go to Hashem Hashem El Rachum, which is on page 229, and the melody, that there are different melodies to Adonai Adonai, but we're going to do the Lewandowski melody. Louis Lewandowski, as I'm sure everyone knows, it is his 200th would-be birthday this year. He was born in 1821 in Poland, and he died in 1894 in Berlin. Now, you may be interested or not, but I promise you someone here is. And it is... No, you wouldn't believe the emails that Cantor gets, like, can you do the Lewandowski this? Can you do the Rosenblatt that? Can you do, there's a rich history, and Lewandowski is one of the great conductors, composers of synagogue music, and the thing about Lewandowski is at the age of 12, he went from the old world to Berlin to study piano and voice, and he became a soprano, and he was trained by Felix Mendelssohn, Moses Mendelssohn's grandson, who was also a famous musician, and he was appointed choir master of the Berlin Synagogue, and became shortly thereafter the royal director of the new synagogue, which would be in our time considered a conservative synagogue, and it was actually during Lewandowski's life that the question of using an organ in services was a very hotly contested issue, and Lewandowski advocated communal singing, and the organ was the tool towards eliciting that. And David Enlow, if there was no Lewandowski, David, you could have been a great baseball player, but there was, and that's why you play the organ. And there's some beautiful, David, are you there? So, like, what are some great Lewandowski? Sadiq Katamar, I think that's, all right, that's Lewandowski. Uchuva Utfila. Lewandowski. All right, Pink Cadillac. No, just kidding. All right, but what you need to know about Lewandowski, and we're about to hear, is that he was every bit the equal of all the composers of his time, but this transformation from being an old world cantor to the new world cantorial style, he was this great both-and figure, that his music transcended not just time, but different communities and musical expressions. In other words, he lived the hyphen. He had a foot in both worlds. And so we turn to page 229 on the 200th anniversary of Lewandowski's birth. Hashem, Hashem. Please rise if you're able.
Adonai, Adonai, el rachum vechanun, erech apayim verav chesed vehemet, notzer chesed la'alafim, nose avon v'fesha v'chata וסלחת לעווננו וחטאתנו ונחלתנו.
We remain standing, turning to page 233. Hear our voice, Adonai our God. Be kind, have compassion for us, willingly and acceptingly take our prayer. The ark is open. Shema Kolenu, page 233.
Shema, Shema Kolenu. Shema, Shema, Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu. Chus v'rachem aleinu. וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו חדש ימינו חדש ימינו ונשובה חדש ימינו חדש ימינו חדש ימינו חדש חדש ימינו אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ורוח קודשך, רוח קודשך, אל תיקח ממנו. אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו, ככלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו. אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ורוח קודשך אל תיקח ממנו. אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו, ככלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו. שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו אדוני אלוהינו, חוס ורחם עלינו, וקבל ברחמים וברצון את
Do not cast us away from you, nor take your holy presence from us. Do not cast us away as we grow old. Do not desert us as our energy wanes. We may be seated. Ki anu amecha. We are on page, is that right, Cantor? Yes, page 234.
Ki anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu. עבדיך ואתה אדוננו. אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו. אנו חרמך ואתה נותרנו. אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו. אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו. אנו עזי פנים ואתה רחום וחנון. אנו כשיורף ואתה ערך אפיים. אנו מלא עוון ואתה מלא רחמים. אנו ימינו כצל עובר, ואתה ושנותיך לא יתאמו. איי 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 איי.
We are on page, it's much easier when we're standing next to each other, Cantor. We're on page 235, is that right? Please rise for the vidui.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, תבוא לפניך תפילתנו, ואל תתעלם מתחינתנו, שאיננו עזי פנים וקשי עורף. לומר לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו. אבל אנחנו ואבותינו ואמותינו חטאנו. איי 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 איי. אשמנו, בגדנו, גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, הבינו והרשענו, זדנו, חמסנו, טפלנו שקר. איי 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 איי. יצנו רע, כיזבנו, לצנו, מרדנו, נייצנו, שררנו, אבינו, פשענו, צררנו, כישינו עורף. איי 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 איי. רשענו, שיחתנו, תייבנו, טעינו, תיטענו.
remain standing. In just a moment, we'll continue with the vidui, the confessional part of our service on 237. There are two questions that I always ask myself here at this moment, and I'll make it very brief. Number one, why do Jews confess in public and not in private? And number two is, why do we confess to things that we ourselves may not have done? Right? I look at the list on 237 and 238. I can't even spell some of these words. I don't, right? I don't know if I succumb to, I guess if I'm succumbing to confusion right now, but oppressive interest, right? Why? Some of these maybe I did, but most of them hopefully I didn't. So why are we confessing to things that we did not do? And so I think of both answer to question number one and number two as tied in, and I think I made mention of this on Rosh Hashanah, that this is a moment that we are affirming our moral social contract. Right? It actually doesn't matter if you did sin A, B, or C. We are coming together as a community here and now, saying this is what constitutes the moral fabric of our community. And when you lose that, you lose a sense of what it means to be a citizen in that community, in our families, in our workplaces, and certainly in our country. And thus we become sort of this disposable, rudderless society. Our obligations one to the other wither. And so when we say this all together, it is our way of affirming what we stand for as contributors and stakeholders in our moral community, whether or not you did the deed. And, of course, you can fill in your own as you're reflective on the year gone by. Page 237, the Cantor continues, Al Chet Shechatanu.
על החטא שחטאנו לפניך באונס וברצון, ועל החטא שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב, על החטא שחטאנו.
We have sinned against you through foul speech. We've sinned against you through foolish talk. We've sinned against you through pursuing the impulse to evil. And we have sinned against you wittingly and unwittingly. For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
על החטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ועל החטא שחטאנו לפניך ביודעים ובלא יודעים. ועל כולם אלוה הסליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו. על החטא שחטאנו לפניך בכך ובחזה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכפת שוחד, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We have sinned against you in everyday conversation. We have sinned against you through conspiratorial glances. We have sinned against you through condescension. And we have sinned against you through stubbornness.
על החטא שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות, ועל החטא שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח, ועל כולם סלח לנו, מחל לנו. על החטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת עול, ועל החטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות.
We have sinned against you through empty promises. We've sinned against you through baseless hatred. We've sinned against you by betraying trust. And we've sinned against you by succumbing to confusion.
על החטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד, ועל החטא שחטאנו לפניך בתימהון לבב. סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר
be seated. In just a moment, we are going to do something we've never done before, a new melody to a very old poem. We're on page 240. At the bottom of the page, Lechol ish yesh shem. Each of us has a name. In Hebrew, a shem, the shem tov being a valuable, the most valuable thing a person can have. I want to speak about this not by way of this prayer, but by way of another prayer, a prayer that we say tomorrow and throughout the holidays, Unatane Tokef. Why that? Because all prayers have their, not all of them, but many of them have their origin in the Talmud. So when we talk about the 4 children at the Passover Seder table, those are actually texts quoted by way of Talmudic texts. And the base text of Unatane Tokef, which says that 3 things avert the evil decree. One is tshuva, repentance. One is tefillah, prayer. And the third is tzedakah, charitable contributions. The interesting thing is the Talmud has 2 others. 2 others. Anyone want to guess what else can avert the evil decree? Well, one of them is shinui makom, which is the change of place. So all of you who bought property in Florida over the last 18 months, right? You fulfilled that mitzvah but keep your membership alive and well here. But the other one that's very interesting that was dropped from the Talmudic text to this text, to the Unatane Tokef, our high holiday machzor, is shinui shem, to change your name. And according to tradition, a change in name can also sort of confuse the devil and avert the evil decree. But my contention, the question is, why did they drop it? And my contention is that it's not the least important, it's actually implied, it's the most important of all of them, because it is the quality of our tshuva, of our repentance, how we relate to someone, the quality of our tefillah, our spiritual living, and the generosity of our tzedakah, which collectively make someone's shem tov, make someone's good name. And the rabbis, of course, say, tov shem tov mi shemen tov, that a good name is better than the finest oil. And so when we think about this poem by the poetess Zelda, she points out that everyone is given a name by their parents, but everyone acquires a name throughout their lives by way of tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, by way of how we comport ourselves in this world. And so we're on page 240, a melody to Lechol ish yesh shem.
לכל איש יש שם שנתן לו אלוהים ונתנו לו אביו ואמו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו קומתו ואופן חיוכו ונתן לו הערים. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו ההרים ונתנו לו כתעליו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו המזלות ונתנו לו שכניו. לכל איש יש שם, לכל איש יש שם, לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו חטאיו ונתנה לו כמיהתו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו שונאיו ונתנה לו טובתו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו חגיו ונתנה לו מלאכתו. לכל איש יש שם שנתנו לו תקופות השנה ונתן לו עברונה. לכל איש יש שם, לכל איש יש שם, לכל איש יש שם שנתן לו אלוהים ונתנו לו אביו ואמו. לכל איש יש שם שנתן לו הים ונתן לו מותו.
We rise. We are on page 243. The ark is opened. Avinu Malkeinu.
אבינו מלכנו, חטאנו לפניך. אבינו מלכנו, חטאנו לפניך. אבינו מלכנו, כמול עלינו ויעלול עלינו ותעפרנו. אבינו מלכנו, חדש עלינו, חדש עלינו, שנה טובה. אבינו מלכנו, כלכל צר ומסתין, ומסתין. אבינו מלכנו, אבינו מלכנו, קולנו
Avinu Malkeinu, do this for the sake of those who went through fire and water to sanctify your holy name. Avinu Malkeinu, do this for your sake, if not for ours. Avinu Malkeinu, have mercy on us, answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us charitably and lovingly, and redeem us. Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed v'hoshienu. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed v'hoshienu.
So the ark is closed. We may be seated. Kaddish Shalem, page 245.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי בכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך יתברך 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 וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודש הבריחו לילה לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירה ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלות הון ובאות הון בכל בית ישראל, קודם עבור הון בבשמיא, ואמרו אמן. יהי של אמר הבא מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
We rise, Aleinu, page 246.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים. שעונות השמיים ויוסד הארץ ומשה ויקרו בשמיים עמנו. כי המלכות שלך היא ולעולמי עד תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד.
If you are in mourning, observing the yahrzeit of a loved one, I invite you to remain standing. Mourners can remain standing, otherwise you may be seated. Page 245, Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Kadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah ve'alma divrach Yerutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'b'yomechon u'b'chayei b'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mavarach le'olam olmei olmaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei dekudasha brichu La'ela la'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabbah min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. May God, who ordains harmony in the universe, grant peace to us, to Israel, to all of humanity, and let us all say, Amen. You may be seated. Good yontiv, everyone. Gemar Chatima Tova. May everyone be written into, or Ketiva, written into the book of life in the year to come. I hope you and your families and your loved ones are all in store for a good year ahead. Cantor Schwartz, I want to thank you for leading our services so beautifully this evening. As always, to our musical accompaniment, to David Enlow, the choir, and the instrumentation, and so many talented individuals who are working hard. We'll thank them all tomorrow just before Ne'ilah, but we're off to a great start on this Yom Kippur day, and thank you to Ross Abelo and to all those who made our services possible, and to acknowledge on the Bima leaders of our community, Mark First and Craig Solomon. We thank you for your leadership, not just today, but every day of the year, and of course to Mark Becker, to Natalie Barth, to you and your families, and the entire lay leadership. We thank you for everything you do on behalf of our community. Tomorrow morning, our services will continue. It's all on the website, or what was sent to you, pasyn.org/High Holidays. All the schedules, the services, times for youth, for families, and everyone else. The Yizkor is going to be at around 1 o'clock tomorrow. Everyone, if you're here in this room, then it's understood, but if you're not and you're coming tomorrow, then please make sure you've uploaded your vaccination card. Only vaccinated individuals may attend in-person services. So please take note of that. After Yizkor at 2 p.m., we're deeply honored to welcome, well, he's always here, he's a member, but Dr. Richard Haas, the president of the Council of Foreign Relations. But we're putting you to work tomorrow because we're going to have our conversation about current global issues and how to better understand them. That will take place right here, so you can be here for that, or, of course, to watch it from afar. And usually during Ne'ilah, obviously this year we're not inviting people up onto the Bima, and so usually we would do that, but during the break after the program with Dr. Haas, but before Mincha starts, there's that sort of time between 3 and 4-ish, the entire community, all the services will be invited if you want to come in, and it'll be safe to do so and take a private moment of meditation before the Ark, you or with your loved ones, then that will be the time to do it, and we have it all set up that people can participate in a moment of quiet prayer, which for so many people is such an important part of their services, to stand in front of the Torah. And then we will blow the shofar eventually as the day winds down. So I want on your seats. We used to have a lot more on the seats. Now we just have a little bit on the seats. I want to thank Rebecca Raphael, who's sitting here, as well as Jean Bloch-Rosensaft, who's afar. The sermon book that is in front of you, take it home, sell it on eBay, do whatever you want to do with it. But I want to thank you, lay leaders and trusted friends and editors, for all your hard work in making that happen. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you're not here, we're going to send it home so you can have it. And Cantor Schwartz has been working very hard on a fabulous music. Cantor, do we have, the cards are on your seat, but I think the producers of it, Ray and Vivian Chu, I think we have a special message from them so we can turn our attention. If you're in the sanctuary, this has been a labor of love, an interfaith project of peace. Let's hear a little bit about it.
Good evening. We are Ray and Vivian Chu, and we are excited to introduce you to the Be the Light project, released just in time to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. This is the culmination of the wonderful relationship we have with Cantor Schwartz. The spirit of this project is to bring people and communities together. This is particularly important during these troubling times where people are in need of the healing that music provides.
That's right. This 8-song album is a beautiful collaboration between the Jewish and Christian faiths. This is just the beginning of us introducing the world to this wonderful project that we are certain will touch people's hearts and their souls.
So please join Cantor and us on this journey by supporting this project. You can stream or download it on all digital platforms. Shana Tova.
All right. Cantor Schwartz, I want to congratulate you on this project. You have the card, you can figure out how to download it. As the Jews signaled, it's just fabulous. It's something that we should all enjoy over and over again. I want to, I think we're wrapping up. I think, it's always this question of what you, how you greet people. Right? And a lot of Jews say, I want to wish you an easy fast. I had this text exchange with my brother in Los Angeles, the son-in-law of Gabe, who I mentioned to you, and I said, have an easy fast. And he said, but aren't we supposed to afflict our souls? And so I was like, okay. And he said, I wish you that your discomfort exceeds that which you expected, or something like, and I'm like, that's why I'm the rabbi in the family, not you. But I do miss my brothers, and I miss my family in Los Angeles, and I wish them a Shana Tova and an easy fast. But it reminds me of the story of Goldstein, who was he was a regular at the local pub, and he walked in, and every Monday night he would set in front of him 4 shots of Macallan, and the bartender was sort of, why not one after the other? Why 4 lined up like that? And he says, well, this is a thing. I'm separated from all my siblings. I miss them very much, and they miss me. And we made a decision that every Monday night we all go to our local pub, and we all pour ourselves 4 Macallans, and we do a l'chaim because we're apart, but we're together. And it was a beautiful thing. And year after year, every Monday night, Goldstein would go in there, and this was his custom until one night he asked for 3. And the bartender said, oh my God, Abe, what God forbid, did something happen to one of your brothers? And Goldstein says, no, I just stopped drinking. All right, I'll give you one more. So Goldstein was down on his luck, still single after all these years. His buddy, Solly, came up to him and says, why aren't you married? Can't you find a woman who loves you? And Goldstein says, I actually have found women I want to marry, but I bring them home, and my mother just doesn't like any of them. And Saul thinks for a moment and says, I have the perfect answer for you, Goldstein. Just find a woman who is exactly like your mother, and that'll work. And so a few months later, the 2 buddies meet up again, and Saul says, Goldstein, did you find a girl? Did your mother like her? And Goldstein is sullen and says, yeah, I found a girl, and my mother absolutely adores her. And he says, so why are you crestfallen? What's the matter? And Goldstein says, well, it's my father. He hates her. You like that one, Ozzy? All right, everybody. Laughter is a good thing. It opens the soul. Go home, or as they say, what do they say? You don't have to go home, but you just can't stay here. So, what movie? Anyone know what movie? Blues Brothers. Very nice. Okay, we'll conclude our services with Adon Olam, page 249. 249.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצור חבלי בצרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא בידו הפקיד רוחי ותישן והעירה ועם רוחי גבייתי אדוני לי ולא יירא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא.
Good yontif, everyone. Good yontif, an easy fast. Good yontif. See you tomorrow.